do want to preface this live with that I am not a legal or tax professional. I do know some, and I work with some, of course. And I do encourage you guys, as you're going through your process of opening up your agencies, hey, Eric, or thinking about running your agencies or getting started, or if you've already started, to really incorporate having access to, because you don't actually have to have an accountant or that type on staff, but having that person accessible to you who can kind of give a little bit more explanation to the two questions I'm going to get into this afternoon. So one of the questions was actually from Eric. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in because I'm way past the time I said I was going to start. One of the questions Eric posted, and I put it up at the top, and then I'm going to read the second question after I give my response to the first one. And his first question from Eric, shout out to you, Eric, was how do you designate your employees? Are they W-2s or 1099? And that's a good question because not too long ago myself, I worked as a 1099 employee for a company doing what they call, and you guys may or may not know about them, Epic Go Lives, where we go to hospitals to help them launch onto Epic. Maybe they're using another system like Meditech or Cerner or what have you, and they're launching to Epic. So they bring in a couple of nurses and have you work alongside with other nurses throughout the hospital for a couple of days. So I did that, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. It's usually something I do. It's just a 2-week assignment, off and on. And I received recently a letter from a legal office or lawyer's office stating that that particular company that classified us as 1099s had violated overtime regulations and they were being sued. So they, as a part of the lawsuit, they reached out to employees that worked during that time period or contractors that worked during that time period to get their information and essentially ask, do you want to be a part of the lawsuit? You can reach out and ask questions and things of that nature. So when I answer a lot of the questions to you guys, I'm not always speaking from like hands-on experience, even though in this instance I am. Sometimes it's other types of experiences that I've had. So just in case you didn't know, there are a lot of companies, some of your big name companies. IAEA just went through a lawsuit regards to job classification over time. Medical Staffing Solutions has gone through it. So it's not something that's not unknown in the industry. It's just one of those things that people don't really talk about. Hey, CJ. So I want to talk about it since we are small business agency owners and kind of give my take. You guys can definitely feel free to chime in and give your experiences. And I'm also giving it from both perspectives. So I work with a company that's being sued because of the classification. And I also had an instance for us in our agency with regards to that as well. And like I mentioned, make sure you verify all the information that you need with your own tax professional and legal professional. So on to the question, how do you designate your employees? Are they W-2s or 1099s? And I think a bigger question to ask is, can nurses be W-2s? And more so, can nurses be W-2s for staffing agency owners? And typically, even though it's happened a lot in the industry, the answer is no. Even if an employee works for your agency, they are still working under another company. They may work as a separate entity of your agency or what have you. Their work is still being guided and directed. They're not working independently. And I think some of the conversation that Eric had on his post was kind of that concepts of independent based on the IRS regulations. And some of this stuff I am paraphrasing, so I'm not doing word for word. So don't ding me on that. But the type of work that nurses do is always on some level supervisory directed, whether it's through the medical provider, whether it's through a director of nursing. So there's a level of supervision. And this is also why many instances CNAs cannot be 1099s because they don't meet the classification. And more so, not only the classification, the intention. So for nurses, that's the main reason. Now, nurses who do home care is a little bit different. And I'm not going to really touch too much on the home care, but for most of us, our nurses who work for our staffing agencies really cannot be classified as 1099s. Does it happen in the industry? Of course, it happens all the time. Is it something to be wary of? For sure. Just because it's happening, one, doesn't make it right, and two, doesn't mean you won't get caught. So I gave the example earlier with regards to the company that I worked for 3 years ago that's being sued for the misclassification by a contractor, because usually the lawsuits are brought by contractors. And essentially the bigger piece of it is the payment of overtime. So when you have an employee, as an employee, you're able to get overtime after 40 hours a week. Looks different in California, so I'm not specifically talking about California versus every place else. And then as a 1099, you're not eligible to be able to get overtime. So a lot of people assume, because many nurses, even myself included, get their own general or professional liability insurance, you have a level of autonomy, not so much independence in the work that you do, that you're okay with being classified that way. And that's just not the case. And another instance where I want to touch on is that we in our agency did that. And you know what happened to us? We received a letter from the IRS. Another NOSA member has also received a letter from the IRS for doing those things. So when I speak about some of the things to you guys, and I'm kind of saying, hey, be cautious, think twice about it, it's because it's been through not only our own experiences, or not necessarily our experiences, but that it's happening. And you don't want to kind of be on the other end of the IRS sending you a letter saying that you misclassified an employee because you read or interpreted the regulations differently. And I want to touch a little bit on the interpretation of the regulations. So the IRS, just like Medicare and Medicaid, have all these great regulations out there that are super complicated to understand. And a lot of the reason why we have so many tax professionals out there is because as regular everyday people, the way that we might see or perceive what it is that they're saying is very, very different. And a lot of times we get ourselves in situations or get ourselves caught up because we saw it one way when actually the IRS is saying, no, it's not like that. It's something different. So I've worked in human resources for the federal government for several years prior to becoming a nurse. So I totally get that piece of it, because a lot of times I've even struggled. But a lot of the rules and regulations that they have in place to doing this whole tax thing is hard to understand. And that's why I encourage people, if you are starting the process or already started the process, to kind of work alongside and get the support of tax advisors, especially for the question that Eric mentioned, because you don't want to be on the wrong end of owing the IRS money from your business. So you guys feel free to chime in and give your take, your opinion. I think the main question is, in addition to what Eric said, is can nurses be 1099 for staffing agencies? And what I was saying too is that just because it's happening doesn't make it right. Are there nurses out there who've been 1099? Yes. I've worked for agencies who have established me as a nurse as a 1099. But what you fail to realize is in doing so improperly, the actual issue is not with the employee. So the employee isn't the person that'll have to pay the bill. It's the agency owner. So just think about it. Get proper advice from a tax professional who understands the system, or an accountant. I know a lot of you guys have accountants in place, but definitely be cautious in doing that piece of it as far as classifying your employees as 1099, specifically your nurses. I don't know anybody who classifies CNAs as 1099s just because they require supervision. So, but I know some of you guys might say home care. I'm not talking about home care. Okay, so Any other comments, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. As always, I'll be on here checking it out.